So I thought maybe I'd just do a quick tutorial by itself on how to make these little bolster pillows. I made this one during the tutorial for this chair, and I really like it. It's so cute. But we need to, well, I've decided now that I've made this chair that I would really love a couple in here. So what I do to begin with is I cut myself a couple pieces of dowel. This I think is about 4 millimeters. You can just use a bit of, old sandpaper to make sure those edges are relatively flat. But this will all be covered, so it's not a big deal. So I'm only gonna make one today in this tutorial, but I'm gonna make two for the chair, but I want the two to be the same size. Then I get a little bit of the foam, the thermofoam that I like, and typically I want it to be exactly the same size as these, which is about 1.25 inches, looks like. I cut myself a strip, see how that might roll up. And basically I just make a little cigarette out of it. I want a couple of widths of the foam. I don't want it too fat. So in this instance, I think about here feels about right. So I'm going to do another piece just like it so that they match. And grab some glue. And you don't really have to cover the whole thing, you just need the end, but a little bit extra for good measure never hurt. Just roll that up, kind of pull it a little bit tight so it stays nice and cylindrical, and then add some glue right at that seam line. Oops, sorry, a little off camera there. There we go. I don't know if these clamps are gonna, no, they're too small. We get the bigger clamps. This will just take a minute to get in the right place. There we go. What I'm trying to avoid is it getting misshapen. There we go. So that we're going to let dry for a second. Well, why don't I just quickly do the other one so it's drying as well. So now that the foam is dried, if you need to trim, there's a little bit that might be not quite even, you can just do that here. And even sometimes I trim a little bit along here just so that the joint isn't as noticeable. There we go. And then with little scrap bits of fabric, first and foremost, we're going to need a piece to wrap around. It's going to be about that length. And this is a scrap that has a little curve in it, so I'm just going to give it a little bit of a trim. And then check our length again. And let's go right about here. So a little piece of fabric, a little roll like that. And with this scrap here, we're going to add the ends. So we're just going to put a little end on each. We need kind of a circle. So and we'll trim it more. We're just getting the basics once it's glued in place. So we need a couple pieces like this, basic size. And again, it doesn't matter that it's not totally circular yet, we will trim it once it's glued. There we go. And let's make sure that the right sides are facing outwards. And then get in your glue on both sides. Like that. And you can just press that down into place. 1 and 2. So we're going to have to let that glue dry before we go any further. When it dries, I'll show you how we trim it down and glue the rest on and add some trim to make it make that raw edge disappear. So once your glue has set up, you can come in and gently and carefully trim. Oops. Wow, breezy, all my pieces of material are flying. Just 1 second. There we go. Breeze just came in the window and all my little pieces of material just went flying across the craft table. So what we're doing here is just trimming it gently close to the size that it needs to be. So it's going to look like that. Do that on both sides. So now we have the end pieces ready to go, and we can now put on the main body. So I look for the seam. And that's where I start again, because, you know, there's going to be one part of this, there's going to be one part of this that's on the couch cushion, so I typically want it to be the seam so that you don't see any join. So I try to put a bead along there and then just a little bit on the edges here. Not too much, because especially in a silkier fabric, because the glue might bleed through your fabric. We are going to put some trim on here, so if it did bleed through, that should hide it, but it's just something to be aware of. And then you just start. I might have gotten the wrong one since these flew across. Oh, that one's bigger. All right, we can trim it if it's a little wide. So I lay this in place and then slowly make sure there's not a gap. And there's excess here. I've cut it a little larger than I needed, so we can always go back and trim that after the fact. And then again on this edge piece, we're going to add some more glue. Kind of like rolling a cigarette. Not that I smoke, but my grandparents did. My grandfather used to roll his own. All right, so this I'm just holding in place. I don't want to use the clamps here if I can get away with it, because sometimes it will, you know, wreck the nice cylindrical shape. So if possible, especially if you're using that fast tack or fast grab aliens, it's best to just go with that. Now we can use the scissors to just go in and trim around this, since I have it a little bit longer than I really needed it to be. But it's better too long than too short, right? There we go. And I might just trim like these other little flush scissors to trim a little bit more, just to make sure there's not too much overhang. Not as sharp as the other ones though. There we go. So there's your little bolster pillow, pretty much done. You just have to add some trim now. Now, the previous one I had this little gold trim. I'm out of that one. So this chair is getting a slightly different one, but I have in my stash shop all sorts of little knobby trims, bric-a-brac and different things like that. And you're just looking for something that will go right on that edge and just disguise, you know, any potential gaps. You could use it just like this. You could add some of the trim that matches the chair. I kind of like to go with the contrast here. So really it's the same principle. We're just cutting out pieces that will go wrap around the edge like this. And I'm going to cut myself a little extra. I'll do both sides while I'm at it. Okay, so let's get our glue again. And the goal here is to be right on the edge. And again, I'm using the seam as where everything's going to join up, because that will hopefully be hidden. I'm just putting very little glue, but right on the very edge of the fabric. This will do a couple of different things. One, you want the trim right on the edge to hide any, you know, possible imperfections. Also on fabric like this, that's silky, you might have some fraying, and the glue will help prevent that. Anything that's in the way. And I'm going to try and lay this down right on the edge, almost overhanging. Again, shameless plug for the fast grab glue. It's the one you want, trust me, for upholstery. And then you can just gently press into place. And same on the other side. Oops, getting away from me. There's frequently a right and a wrong side of these things, so this one not so much, but some of them there are, so that's what I was double checking for, that I wasn't putting one in one way and the one on the other side showing the wrong side. These ones seem to be pretty similar on both, so that makes it easier. And again, just trim and press into place. And you can see this kind of hides, you know, any raw edge that might have been showing. We've got really nice finished edge. And then that will look perfect sitting right there. So this is a quick and easy one for you, but this is how I make all my bolsters.